Simpson from Prevention. I'm Ann Simpson from Prevention Works, and we're here for our second evening with Rachel Hardies, and we're going to up our parenting game. I'm excited. Last week was great. Comments in the chat, and let's go. Let's do
All
it.
right. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. So class number 2, as we talked about, class number 1 is available. So we are going to start. Well, last time, for those that were here, we started with an ease key called Get Your Witness in Play. And today we're going to start with another body awareness activity. And these are activities that are designed to help connect us with our body, right? Bring that awareness. And through that, we can stay connected to ourselves and we can create balance in our system. So these become exercises to practice regularly to either connect with yourself through the day or ideally to connect with yourself if you're starting to dysregulate, if you're starting to feel yourself go into a stress response. So this is a centering exercise from Trauma-Informed Yoga, a toolbox for therapists. So I invite you to sit on a chair or a firm couch to support your posture. Just because if you're on something too soft and cushy, it can be kind of hard to keep yourself straight and tall, but not rigid. I know last week we did a set your seat, so you can practice setting your seat and finding that comfortable spot with your pelvis. So I invite you to begin by focusing on centering your attention in the present moment. Feel free to have your eyes open or closed, whichever way feels better to you. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice your bottom on the chair or whatever you're on. Feel the support of the floor and the chair under your body. And then notice your breath with no need to make any changes. Simply notice that you're breathing. And notice, are you breathing through your nose? Are you breathing through your mouth? Are you breathing slowly or quickly? There are no right or wrong answers here. This is observations for you to make about yourself. If you feel like it, and if you aren't already, I invite you to breathe through your nose. Give it a try. And as you're doing this, notice the pace of your breathing. And you can start by counting the length of your inhale as you breathe in, and the length of your exhale as you breathe out. Keep it the same. Simply notice what it is. Does your breathing seem irregular? Or is there a pattern emerging? And again, remember, there are no right or wrong answers. You're simply gathering information for yourself. For example, if you're inhaling and exhaling for a count of 3, consider trying to inhale and exhale for a count of 4, or something similar like that. And also feel free to keep breathing as you are, and simply notice that you're inhaling and exhaling. And with that, like what's moving? Your shoulders, your chest. Can you breathe that air into the back of your lungs? So inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. I invite you to notice that you are here now, present with your breath. Bring your attention back to your feet. Now move your attention to your belly. Now move your attention to your heart. And now to your head. And inhale and exhale. If your eyes are closed, open them slowly and orient yourself to the room that you're in. Notice how you are feeling in this moment. Go ahead and take another breath. Bring your attention back to the screen, please. If you feel like that you'd like to, you can chat in a phrase or a word to describe how you're feeling right now. You don't have to. You can also simply note for yourself, how are you feeling after that? What are you noticing? So with that, here we go. So as Shelley and Anne have both said, this is the second of 4 classes. The next one's March 2nd, next Wednesday, and March 9th. And they're 1 hour. As you have questions, please put them in the chat. And right there is the link or the page where the link to the first class is. And let's go ahead and pause and take a look at the chat. Nice. Yeah. I certainly feel more settled. So I'm redoing my invitations. I think we have some new people. So simply to invite you to notice that new information, if there's new information tonight, it can feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. I invite you to notice your reactions and your body responses and what thoughts you might be having if you're having judgments. I ask that you please keep an open mind. There are lots of theories about parenting. This is by no means, I'm saying this is the best that I'm coming from a relationship perspective, and how to build and improve the relationship with our kids. I invite you to share as we go in chat, and I will pause to check in on that. And things we talk about like last week and today and next week and the week after, it's all about practice. Everything we know in mental health, body work, and the wisdom traditions is we need to practice for it to be effective for us and for us to be able to draw on it in those moments when we need it. I hope that if I share something you already know, that maybe I'm sharing it in a different way. And with that, I sometimes hold in mind the idea of being a beginner's mind. So when I'm going to trainings, I'm like, oh, I already know this. I stop myself and pull back. I'm like, I'm going to bring a beginner's mind. I'm going to pretend that I don't know anything and bring a curiosity to see what happens. So that is my invitation for you tonight. And I also thought it would be helpful because repetition helps us learn. To go through to a hopefully quick review of what we covered last week. It was a lot of information. One of the things we talked about was the consensus right now among research is that our nervous system is designed to keep us alive by constantly scanning our environment under our conscious level for our survival. And sometimes there's true threats to our physical and emotional safety. And other times there's what we kind of have termed like paper tigers. There's situations that feel threatening, but they might not really be about our survival. So for kids, sometimes this can be math time in class. I can't tell you how many kids come into my office and tell me how much they dislike math. And so when something's new or when it's hard, it's going to create a challenge and it can activate our stress response. So when we talk about threats, it's also our perceptions of threats and also challenges that activate the stress response. So with that, we have 4 areas that Lisa Dion, who created synergetic play therapy, has conceptualized as 4 places where we might perceive a threat. So physically or emotionally unsafe, when there's an incongruence in our environment, when something in our environment just isn't matching, and I like to think of it in terms of our spidey sense kind of tingles. We can't quite tell what it is. Sometimes we can, other times we can't. But if there's an incongruence in our environment, when we're facing the unknown, and more specifically the stories we tell ourselves about the unknown, because those stories generally aren't helpful or supportive. And then shoulds and shouldn'ts, supposed to's, those kinds of things tend to activate a stress response for us because they typically deny the way things really are. If I should have done something, well, then I didn't. And so I can beat myself up or activate my stress response in reaction to that when I didn't. And so if I can practice accepting reality, I can help my nervous system. So then this nervous system stress response, that was where we spent a lot of time. We did it, we talked about it in terms of cats. And so rather than going through all those pictures of kitties, I think they're cute. I have my little kitty puppet that I'm still trying to figure out how to make all my fingers make it work. but we talked about how we have the alert kitty right? This is the kitty that's just sitting and watching their world, and that's our brain scanning our environment for threats and safety. Then, oh my gosh, the kitty sees that there's a threat. So the first thing the kitty is going to try to do is it's going to try to run away, right? It's going to take off. But if the kitty realizes I can't get away from this, then it's going to fight. And that's when we get the kitty's, I don't know if I can make its back and its tail up and all puffy, right? And it's threatening. It's going to try to fight. And this is thought of as being mobilized by fear. The animal or human is afraid at that point, and we're mobilized by fear to run away or fight. Then we have the scaredy cat, or the collapse, or the shutdown. This is the cat that goes, yep, there's a threat. I can't run away. I can't fight this. So I'm going to shut down. I'm going to go hide under the bureau and be immobilized by fear. And then we have the safe kitty, right? This is the kitty who's like, oh, just pet me and sit with me, and it purrs and it's happy. And this is when there's no threat or a challenge. Then our nervous system motivates us to play, to get things done, to sit still and meditate, or to simply be still, to relax, to rest. This is where we eat. We generally can't eat if our system's activated. Our guts are oftentimes a really big part of that. But when we're safe, this is where we connect and where we can be curious. So we look at those 4 aspects of our nervous system and our stress response for ourselves and for our kids, and to let ourselves be detectives of what their behavior might be indicating is going on with their stress response. And last week we had lists of the different behaviors seen in each of these instances. Then we talked about regulation, with regulation being the ability to be in the intensity of our stress response and what we feel in our body without trying to shut it down or avoid it. It's part of a continuum, and we're not 100% at this. I don't think we ever will be, as we're designed to move through different states. So the point is to improve our ability to both be present to that mobilized by fear, the attack cat or the runaway cat, and our ability to be in that collapse, shut down, fraidy cat, can't do anything about it place. And this is an ongoing practice. And that's why we're doing these little ease keys, moments of awareness and connection, because it only takes these little bits to help reconnect to ourselves and regulate. Lets us be in the intensity of what's in our body so that we can be aware. An ongoing practice. So then we talked about co-regulation, and we might have been running a bit out of time at this point, but it's the idea of offering our regulation, our groundedness, our connectedness to another to help them reconnect with ourselves. It requires one person who's regulated to be able to provide co-regulation. Ideally, we want it to be us as parents, and sometimes our kids are more regulated than we are, and they can offer theirs to us. Like, there's no rules on that. So a key component of co-regulating is being able to regulate yourself, and that's why we've talked about the nervous system. And being able to co-regulate our kids, one way is to name it, to tame it, to be able to name what's happening inside of ourselves and note what we need to do with it so that we can show them what to do with it. So I'm going to pause there. Were there any questions from last week, from anybody who was here last week, or any quick questions about that? I said that's all in the first video. Okay, I don't see the chat, but if anything comes up, go ahead and chat it in. And then we briefly touched on this kind of after class last time, but this was where, and why we're doing this class is because of where the world is right now. And so if you think about the perceptions of threat, we're in a situation, kind of regardless of where you fall in beliefs, that any one of those areas of a perceived threat, if not all 4 of them, have been touched at one time or another over these 2 years repeatedly. And so there's a high stress response happening within the community. I think that's why we're seeing, or within the globe, but they're suspecting that's why we're seeing an increase in car accidents, even though there were fewer cars on the road. They're seeing higher levels of aggression. We're seeing lots of people shutting down. Like, we're really seeing kind of these opposite ends, low thresholds, people being more reactive and defensive and less connected to themselves. And so one of the ways to play with this, or to pay attention to this, is to notice, like, what is your mind telling you? about the situation that we're in right now, about what's happening in schools, what's happening in the world, as well as kind of this thinking around what do you tell yourself about your kiddo? And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But just to hold in mind, like right now is a really hard time. So I'm a mental health counselor. I work in a group practice, so there's a team of us, and we're all struggling. I don't know many people who aren't. And my fervent wish would be to be able to have enough money that we could close the doors for a month and just have the team take a real conscious quarantine, because we haven't quarantined at all. And be able to catch our breath, be able to regulate, be able to work with the stress responses in our own nervous systems. So they're just, like I said, I've heard stories of some people who are doing pretty well right now, and some kids have really thrived with the online school. So I think we've learned a lot. I wouldn't say this is an awful situation. I would say that this is a trying situation for how our nervous systems are designed. With one of the biggest being that we're not really designed to have a chronically high stress response. It's supposed to be a burst of energy to get us into whatever survival place we need. And then it's supposed to pass, and we're supposed to be able to reconnect with ourselves and carry on. But we've lived in a perceived threat and a real threat for over 2 years now. So we're really at the edges of any of our abilities to regulate. So to normalize, like, this is a hard time, and it's hard for adults, and it's hard for our kids too. Kids are feeling it, kids are experiencing it. So something to hold in mind, and a way to take what we've talked about, which is somewhat theoretical and somewhat knowledge-based, and look at how it plays out in our reality. So again, I'm going to pause there. Any questions or comments? I can't see the chat anymore. Okay, so we are going to pause, and we're going to do another ease key. This one comes from Emerging Wisdom's book, Self-Regulation. And so this is about finding our awe. And it's based on the idea that our jaw is where we tend to hold a lot of tension. If anybody grinds their teeth at night, right, that's impacting our jaw. So I really like this one. Combines a yawn with relaxing the jaw. So we're going to start by yawning. And it doesn't matter if it's real or pretend. I invite you to notice if we simply keep saying the word yawn. Yawn. Are you feeling the pull to yawn? And for many, it's believed that a yawn or a sigh actually activates the relaxation response in our body. So start by yawning, and notice and feel the heaviness of your lower jaw. Feel the weight of gravity. Feel the softness in your cheeks and your jaw as you just let it open. And now as you're breathing, when you exhale, find your ah or sigh. So you can Yawning is good for you because it activates the relaxation response, and it opens space in the back of our throat that can help us take a deeper breath. Sometimes, I know for me, especially if I'm feeling angry, my throat gets tight, but sometimes for some of us, it's just even when we're stressed, that whole area gets tight. So go ahead and take another breath in, and then and let yourself observe your neck and your jaw and your breath following that. Thank you. So we're going to talk about attunement. It's going to come into play next week because it is part of the attentive play process of being near. And I thought it would be helpful to talk about it tonight because it's an important part of being able to regulate and being able to co-regulate. So attuning is about listening intently. It's the act of listening intently or paying attention to the details of what someone is telling you. And in this case, talking about it as being parents, we want to pay attention to the details of what our child is offering to us. And they could be offering it through their words, through their behaviors, through sounds they're making. Doesn't mean it's pleasant. Sometimes they might be showing it through their frustrated behaviors, but this is their offering to us. And so what you can do to attune as well as then regulate is notice how your body and mind are responding to your child. Notice your thoughts, notice your sensations. And then by being present, your responses show them that you're there and that you're really listening and really attending to them. And so it's okay when you're engaging with your kids to allow yourself to recognize the mood and emotions they might be showing, to allow yourself to name them, to allow yourself to talk about what it might feel like, and to show them how you might take a deep breath or stretch or move or do something that some body movement with that. I sometimes think it's easier to envision attuning by talking about what it's like when we're not attuned to another person. So I invite you to remember a time when you were talking to someone and they didn't respond at all. Maybe they were on their phone. That's a pretty common right now. But no head nod, no no eye contact, nothing. If you've had that situation, did you have the thought, like, did you think they were listening to you? Or did you have the thought of, oh, maybe you started to feel frustrated because it doesn't seem like they were paying attention? So that's an example of not being attuned to. Another one that I've had happen, and it's so embarrassing, but a time when you laughed at what you thought was a joke, only to then look at the other person's face and see that they're not laughing. And in those moments, how quickly do you stop laughing? And right there, you stop laughing, maybe you change your face, all more serious. That's attuning to the emotional state of the person that you're with. So another example of this is the still face experiment. This is from, I think it was from the 70s, maybe late 60s. And it's work by Edward Tronick from University of Massachusetts. And he was doing research on mothers and their infants. So as we watch this can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable. So I invite you to take a breath now, get your witness in play, and notice how you're feeling as you're watching this, and notice how you're thinking or what thoughts might be going through your head. I have it set to share sound. We tested this, it worked, but Anne or Shelly, if it's not working, please let me know.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Would anybody like to share in chat what they noticed and what that was like to watch? Or just notice for yourself.
Well, I've seen that several times now, and I have to say that because I knew what was going to happen, I didn't have an emotional reaction to it, but I was aware that the reason I wasn't having an emotional reaction is that I knew what was going to happen at the end.
Right.
So I remember the
Yeah.
first time seeing it being like really upset by this, and even now, I will admit, I think I was like, I hope that they didn't do that very many times. I hope they like did that one time and taped it one time and that child. So, okay, I did have an emotional reaction, even though I have seen it several times. I was still concerned about the
Yeah.
procedure of doing that. Yeah.
Right. I know it's surprising that that it got through ethics. I don't know if it would anymore. But yeah, it made you sick. It was really hard. It is. I find when my mom turns around, I know my body gets really tight, and then I want to like shake her and be like, pay attention. The important piece, because we cannot attend to our kids all the time. I actually have a video from when my son was maybe 7 months old, somewhere around there. And he was trying to get my attention. I had no idea. And I watched this video and I felt so bad because it's so obvious in this video that he's trying to get my attention. So the important part that we don't talk a lot about is that idea of repair. And this happens in any relationship. There's ruptures. What's this idea of a rupture happens, and then we repair it. And that can be through apology, hugs, talking it through, whatever it might be, depending on the relationship and depending on the age. But we can repair, as well as at one point, and I honestly don't remember where this percentage came from anymore, but like you only need to be a good enough parent like 20% of the time. Right? So we don't have to be perfect. And just to take that weight off, especially because there's a lot of theories and ideas out there that would tell us there's a right way to do this. And I would challenge that you know your kiddos, you know them best, and you know yourself. And so you can work on improving that. You can work on knowing yourself better. You can work on paying better attention to them and building the relationship. But ruptures and repairs are going to happen all the time. So this is that idea of attunement, right? So when the mom and the baby are going back and forth, right, it flows and everything's good and you can see the connection. And as soon as the mom goes still, right, you can see that connection isn't happening in the same way. They're not going back and forth. So that's the idea of attunement, and you can use that to regulate. So when you're interacting with your kids or anybody, like really this applies to anybody we interact with, but as you interact, you can notice what's starting to happen to you in this interaction and let yourself notice, are you attuning to them or not? Kids aren't supposed to attune to us. Some do depending on their temperament, which we'll talk about, and how they grow, but it's not their job to attune to us. It's our job as parents to attune to them. Then the other piece, so we talked a lot last week, and we've talked so far like about our bodies, because our bodies are the most dynamic, most concrete way we have to regulate. And then there's this other piece of the triangle that are our thoughts and our perceptions of the situation or the challenges or whatever's happening in our lives. And so I love, this is a quote from William Shakespeare, that there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And this can be I see resistance to this idea often, and it comes out of a lot of different wisdom traditions, and some other human behaviorists are talking about this idea that every situation has both, if we want to judge it that way. There's both good and there's both bad. And it's up to us to notice what we're noticing. And oftentimes in a situation, we can get ourselves tightly bound to what's good about it, or more commonly, because this is our brains, more likely bound to what's bad about it, or get caught up only seeing when our kids are doing those things that are bugging us and not noticing when they're doing what we've told them to do, or when they're playing quietly, or those things. Those don't create the same level of emotional charge. Something bad does. And so this is where there is this important piece of noticing, how are you thinking about things? What is your mind telling you? And so with that, I've been taught and deliberately use the words perceive or perception. For myself, I call it a story. Like, I'm telling myself this story, and I can check out my story most of the time, or I can at least see if I can hold it more loosely. And so, and lots of different theories and lots of wisdom traditions really are taking us to a place that lets us understand the tremendous impact on our experiences that our thoughts have, and how much of an impact it has on how we react to things. And with that, there's a number out there. And again, I didn't learn how we know this, but there's this idea that we tell ourselves about 10,000 words a day. That's a lot of words. And some of it's probably a lot of repetition. And so we can tune into our thoughts and notice, what are we reinforcing for ourselves? What are we tending to tell about ourselves? What are we telling about our situations, our kids, our experiences, with the knowledge that our thoughts and our memories and our remembrances are not always accurate. They might be interpretations of what happened, or we might be creating meaning from someone's behavior that was not what they meant. Nonviolent communication talks about this in terms of observations, using our power to observe and notice a situation rather than add judgments or interpretation to it. So there's this idea of a thought triangle, and this one's not written as parenting, but let's say we have there's an activating event. That's a cognitive behavioral term, but there's a situation, something's happened. And in this instance, the person can't go to the party as they promised. So now in their head, they're going to have these thoughts, and they might go to this place of, oh, I've let everybody down. They're going to be so angry with me. I'm not a good friend. Those thoughts are probably not going to help them feel very good about themselves, and are probably pretty likely to activate their stress response. So then they're going to have their feelings about it. So because they're having these thoughts and they think they're a bad person, they might now feel bad, or they might feel guilty, and whatever that sensation is in our bodies. And then as a result of those feelings and thoughts, like these all go back and forth, then they're going to take action, and their action might be that they're going to withdraw. And they might avoid their friends because they're embarrassed and they think their friends are already thinking this. So regulating is really pausing and paying attention to this interplay for ourselves, and listening to and noticing this interplay the best we can with our kids, because they have thoughts too. I work with young kids who get so frustrated and say bad things about themselves, or unhelpful things. So these are all areas, there's so much to pay attention to. So it's what our minds tell us. And this is where it's good to pull back and go, well, what are you telling yourself about your child? What are you telling yourself about their behavior? How do you label their behaviors? How do you label them? Is it their behavior, or is it them? You know, a lot of parenting theories talk about, well, you know, you cannot like the behavior, but most of the time, please like your kids. It's also out there and true that sometimes we just don't like our kids. But sometimes when we're labeling things, we want to label the behavior, right? You don't want to label the kiddo. So I thought we could experiment with regulating and noticing our body and our thoughts, kind of using the idea of mental rehearsal or visualization that athletes use, because regulation takes practice. And so let's practice. So I invite you to pause. If at any time as we go through this, it's not too uncomfortable, please stop. This is an experiment in using visualization for our parenting, so we can up our parenting game. So pause, notice your body, feel it supported with what you're sitting or laying on. Notice the sensations there. So we're just checking in. We've been checking in a little bit through the night. Is anything tight? Are you feeling relaxed? Check in with your breathing. So have this awareness. Where's your breath going? What moves as you breathe? And are there any maybe active thoughts in your head right now? So we're checking in. So now I invite you, this is going to be the visualization piece, where I want you to turn your attention to an interaction that you had with your child. Probably one where you felt frustrated, angry, sad, not a positive, not an emotion we would label as positive. And preferably imagine something that happens repeatedly, where in this instance you didn't behave the way you'd like to. So we're going to take kind of this repetitive, maybe frustrating behavior that your kiddo does, or this dynamic that you get into. And I want you to start imagining it. And as you remember it, I want you to bring to mind the environment. What did it sound like? What did it smell like? What was the temperature? How was your body feeling there? And now start visualizing that situation. And I'm going to ask you to pause, and I want you to check in with your body. What's happening in your body now? Have the sensations changed? Are you having different thoughts? No right or wrong. This is about noticing. Do you need a deep breath? Do you need to adjust your posture? Do you need to stretch? So take a breath. We're going to go back into the memory. Okay, so again, go into that environment. Think yourself through this memory. What did they do? What did you do? What did they say? What did you say? What are you telling yourself about this situation? What are you telling yourself about your child? And again, I invite you to pause, check in with your body and breath, and notice if it's changed. So now I invite you to return to the memory, but I want you, we're going to imagine doing it differently. So imagine the environment, what was happening, what did they do, what got you started, what behavior or words did you start to respond to? Now imagine yourself taking a deep breath before you act or speak the way you did. Maybe in that situation, you can name what was happening in your body. Maybe your tummy was tight. Maybe you felt powerless. So you're going to imagine what you're saying, and you're going to take a breath and roll your shoulders, maybe if that's what your body needs. Maybe you need to bring them really tight. Maybe you want to make your body really tight. And imagine staying connected with your child in that moment. Imagine taking that breath so that you can act the way you want to act. Imagine letting any of those upsetting thoughts you were having, let them flow from your mind. And tune into your child so that you can see what they're showing you or saying in that moment. And take a breath and notice your body. Maybe finish up your visualization and bring yourself back here. And if anybody would like to chat in with what you noticed, what that was like, if you think that might be helpful, it's kind of an experiment on visualizing these difficult interactions, because I've talked with enough parents, and I'm a parent to a 15-year-old, and I know we have these places where we kind of typically have the same fight. And so you can rehearse regulating your way through it, rehearse naming it, be prepared, because that's a way to practice that can help you behave the way you want to behave. I can't see the chat. Did anybody have anything to share or any?
There's nothing in the chat, but I feel like I talk too much during this, so you can privately tell me to knock it off. But I found that really helpful. I closed my eyes and I actually did stretch my neck and my shoulder, and it was interesting that, especially as you would come along in queue, it's like, oh, you're right on target. So I just meant to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So you can apply this to any, any anxiety producing situation, any stress response situation that could happen. It's a way to just visualize and notice what's happening.
Can I ask a question, Rachel? So, my kids have shaky relationships with the truth. That's how I like to phrase it. And I don't like being lied to. Like, it really is a huge trigger for me. And so I've thought about, and I've tried using this phrase where, that doesn't sound like the truth, but I'm gonna carry on. But I have this fear around it that then I'm letting them like get away with lying. Whereas my tendency is to get to the bottom of it. So what do you think about that? Because I mean, that is maybe a trigger for other people too, when their kids lie to them. And sometimes it's about, they don't even need to lie about it or have an untruth, if we want to be politically correct here. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I like your response, and because well, I know this is an ongoing challenge, and for lying is a natural part of childhood. Even the good kids like lie. So you're never not going to be lied to. But I know you're talking about a frequency that's uncomfortable and concerning. And I where my mind goes is to bring in, what does that do to your relationship with them? Right? If they were an adult who was acting in this way, what would you want to do? And so in synergetic play therapy, Lisa talks about responding to our kids through the relationship. So it's not like being mean and cutting them off or being punitive about it. It's being, gosh, that sounds really hard to believe, and I'm worried I won't believe you when it's really important, or something along those lines. It puts me in a place where and depending on their ages, that might not have a huge impact yet. I'm working on that with my son, like, and you got to follow through on what you said, or here's what happens, right? I'm not going to believe your words. I want to, but I see your actions and it's showing me two different things and it's confusing. But I think, like you're doing, it's important to not give it too much attention and bring in that piece of what is the impact on the relationship, but from a regulated place, from a real caring place, not from a punitive place, which can be easy to get to.
Well, my kids are preteen and teens. And so what I have talked to them about is like right now, if you are not honest about this, it doesn't have a gigantic, affordable versus inaffordable mistakes, basically. Like right now, if you lie about turning off the TV or something, or getting off your game, that's something like, okay. But then if you say you're going to be home by you're 17 and you say you're going to come home by 10, but you don't come in home until 1. So I've tried to, like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. We're all doing the best we can, but just like showing them what kind of like person you want to be, like, this is a habit. But you ultimately, you're saying that when they lie, not to have a big reaction, but to say, oh, that doesn't sound right, but you know what, we need to carry on with our day. And they don't then feel like they're getting away with something.
Right. They
like,
know you're paying attention
all the time. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And the other piece is that if these behaviors are coming out with their peers, their peers are going to start giving them lessons. right? They'll start to see other relationships because your mom, right, that like you're gonna love them and hold them and accept them no matter what, but they might have some hard lessons through their friends. Yeah. Yeah, Anne?
So Rebecca had a comment in it. She just went right there to that place. Is like when my child is, I don't remember, she was a little more eloquent, but you know, my child is spiraling out, then that my reaction is to join him, you know, like you attune in that way. And it's like it's really hard to get yourself centered. So to me, I thought maybe if you had a quick answer to that. And my quick answer, which I would like your feedback on, is for me, what I've learned late in life is I have to practice centering several times a day, just by, you know, doing some short breathing or stretching or something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't
exactly.
keep it together.
No. Right now, I would say movement is imperative. Walking, stretching, yoga, jumping jacks, like movement. So yeah, Rebecca, that's a good question. And it kind of it falls in line with this concept that our emotions are contagious. Right? So I would invite you to really tune into your body and regulate in that moment that he's having his emotions, and also look at your thoughts. Like sometimes, well, I know as parents it's hard for us, or most of us, to watch our kids struggle, and so often I see this in play as well, that we want to jump in and make it, fix it for them. So I would invite just all of us to notice what's happening in your body, and what are you telling yourself in that moment when your son is upset. Is he behaving in a way that maybe you've experienced as threatening? Like there can be so many different reasons, and it's so personal, and it is so hard to stay centered. And that's where you can pause, you can time out in the name of the relationship, maybe take some space, go breathe, go stomp, whatever it might be. And then you're showing him that we can take time outs for connecting to ourselves and then come back together. And he might not welcome a hug. He might not want you too nearby, but you can let him know you're there or you're present. But I think there's a lot to exploring those two places, your body and your mind, in response to that. The other thing that keeps coming in and out of my mind that I'm going to remember to say right now is that when any of us are moving to a stress response, we can't hear very well. Our hearing, we just don't register it. So even if we're hearing a kind voice, even if you're being a soothing parent, it might not be getting in. And that's why we bring in the body movement and the deep breaths or the jumping jacks or things like that. Let's see, I'm looking. Oh shoot, they're having connection issues. Back on. Okay. So yeah, you're welcome, and we can keep exploring this too. But it's so much when we're talking about a parent-child dynamic. Like I've just experienced how different it is for me. I'm way worse at regulating when I'm talking with my own son than when I'm working with all my clients through a week. It's so much easier. I have so much less invested, I guess, and parenting is very personal. We oftentimes think of our kids as extensions of us, and they're representing us, and people are judging us for our kids' behavior. So all of these things just converge and make it really challenging to regulate with our kids. As well as I've noticed, and I'd be curious if you all have too, like there's a lot more fear for me. And I think, Amanda, you kind of spoke to this too. Like if my son's engaging in behaviors that I look at, I just think, oh my gosh, like I can't stand those behaviors in adults, and I do not want my child to have these behaviors. Those can elicit a fear response in me, right? So they're going to bring out my stress response, and then I'm absolutely not parenting from my best space. So that's where the thoughts, noticing, well, what am I telling myself about this situation or my son right now, can help ground me to, okay, I'm going to pull back because he is only 15 and development has a long way to go still. and I can scaffold and I can teach, and like you, Amanda, you can have those conversations, like these are going to have impacts, these behaviors matter, and then they experience it. Good questions, thank you. And if we need to talk more, we can carry it on into next week. I'm just looking, oh my God, it's 7:25. How did that happen? Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, that's okay. We can move some stuff to next week. Briefly, developmental tasks is like, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Anna and I were talking about it. There's been research through the years around kids' development, and there's different ways to look at it. The important thing about it is to know that kids are going to have different abilities at different times in their lives, and that different kids are going to have different abilities at different times from different kids in the same age group. And when I was taught in school, and I'll show you this and then we'll be done for tonight, I had a teacher who kind of took the idea of development and made it into like, what questions are being asked, or is the child asking as they grow through development and through this early childhood. And so in that way, there's a bit of a linear progression. And we see this right in physical growth and development, and cognitive growth and development. And then he had this idea that it's not always, well, like it's linear, but then if something happens, like, you know, you live in a pandemic and now sort of the world's not necessarily safe, and that'll make sense in a minute, we're all going to go right back to that level of development. How do we create safety? How do we feel safe? And thinking about development and where kids have their ability is really important for setting our expectations as parents. So knowing that it's very normal for a toddler to hit and not share, and parallel play as opposed to play together, like all of these things can be normal developmental tasks for them. And if we're expecting them to share, we're asking more of them than they're even capable of. So these can be helpful for setting our expectations, which then help us stay regulated because we're not combating an expectation or a should. So the tasks, this comes from Dewey Friedman. He was my teacher at Naropa, and then synergetic play therapies added a little bit to it. So it's this idea of like from conception to birth, the question being asked is, do I exist? So how were the parents feeling about the pregnancy? What was the mom's experience? Not to blame the moms, it's just this question of, do I exist? And sometimes this shows up in the playroom in different behaviors or comments. They all do. And then birth to 18 months is this idea of the baby, the infant into the young toddler is learning that the world is safe. And so this is where, as a caregiver, we do our best to meet their needs as consistently as we can. We help them have routine and we help them have structure as best as we can. Not perfect, do not need to be perfect. Do it more often than not, and you're pretty good. You'll be fine, because then there's the rupture and the repair. It's okay for kids to feel distress. They need to feel distress. They need to understand that they're not always going to get what they want. And that's where Gordon Neufeld talks about. So Dr. Gordon Neufeld is a developmental psychologist out of Vancouver, Canada, and he advises us parents and adults to trust in nature and the timing of development. And he also puts out this idea that kids need to experience futility. So that's going to start to happen as soon as they're born. So let's see. Okay, what else? So kids who maybe aren't feeling safe, and not that they're, again, physically unsafe, but they might be clingy. They might be the kids we label as clingy, but they might be looking for the safety of your proximity. They're not going to have a lot of words to tell you that they're not feeling safe, so they're going to show you, right? They're going to be clingy. At the end of this stage, put my glasses on, and into the next, this is where we see the separation anxiety. For any of us, like I said, as adults, if we feel unsafe, we're going to go back to this. The world's not safe. How do I create safety for myself? A sense of safety, right? A felt sense of safety. We co-regulate infants a lot by rocking and soothing sounds, and you can name it to tame it for them in a soothing voice. You can co-regulate older kids by like just rocking near them if they're not going to let you hold them, but you can start to move in a gentle rock, and their nervous system's going to see it. I don't know if any of you have kids who just want you to read the same story like every night, 5 times a night. While that can be challenging for us as parents, it's been put out that that's an idea of a child seeking safety. It's a known, they know the story, they know what's going to happen, they know how it ends, so it's soothing. So then we move into 18 months to 36 months, full on toddlerhood, and kids are asking the question of, am I okay? If they're developing a sense that they're okay, they're acceptable the way they are. So we're going to test limits. They want to know, are you still going to love them? Are they still okay? Even if you get angry with them and you repair. This is a time to be aware of what we're saying to our kids and what words we're using with them. This is where they like to be kind of independent. So maybe they don't want you to hug them so much, but you can be near, you can be available, you can empathize and state what you're seeing. 3 to 6 years, so preschool, is how much can I do? So this is not about quality at all. They don't care. This is about quantity. They don't care about fine details. They don't have the muscular development for it most of the time. This is the kiddo who takes a crayon and a coloring book, opens it up, scribbles one page, flips it to the next, scribbles, maybe puts a mark on that one, flips it, scribbles, flips it, scribbles, flips it, scribbles. So if any of you've seen that happen, what happens for you? What thoughts do you have when you're watching maybe this age group do that kind of behavior? I know my mind's like, oh my God, that's wasting paper, right? Like recycling, color the whole thing. I don't know. Right? So that starts to activate my stress response. They don't care. It's just how they're just like soaking in the world. How much can I do? Look at all that I can do. How much can I do it? And then they go to school and we see them start to move into how well can I do it? This is where they have the fine motor skills. They're coloring inside those lines. They might have a complete temper tantrum for coloring outside the lines because it's so important to color inside the lines. They're going to start making comparisons between themselves. This is really general, really expected at this age, between themselves and other kids. Might have a hard time admitting mistakes. Rules can be really important to this age group. And this is where they start seeking approval from their peers, especially as they get more towards 10, 11 into that preteen age. That they want to do the best they can. So I think maybe we'll stop there and we'll go through temperament next time. But any questions or thoughts or things you want to make sure we talk about next time?
Amanda, I
know,
love
right?
that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But
Holy
yeah,
cow.
how's everybody else doing? Is this dragging for you guys, or we're not going fast enough?
Just speaking from what's going on over here, we really appreciate this. It's really restorative, very helpful to take this time and to be with these topics, and doing it together, me and Dan, is very, very helpful. So thank you.
No, thank you. It's really meaningful. Yeah, thank the rest of you guys for the comments in the chat, because you seem like very thoughtful people on the other side of this screen, and it's important for us at Prevention Works to have clear feedback from parents, because I think that's one of our goals in the next few years is how do we be more relevant to parents? We've had a lot of connections in the professional community, which is great, but we need to figure out how to also like up our game with the parents, I guess. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Well, you're welcome. And I do invite, I was telling Anne about this before everybody was on. I freaked out about this part tonight as I was putting the finishing touches on, because I suddenly felt like I didn't have enough detail. And I started to think that you all and parents might want more of the things that we're a little more used to, right? That this is how much they sleep, they can't focus, they can't discriminate this, they turn their head, like the more concrete physical aspects. So if you would like that, if that would have been helpful, I really invite you to let us know. Let's see, maybe I'll zip ahead here to, there's my contact information. I'm a mental strength coach for Head in the Game Consulting, and I'm a mental health counselor specializing in child therapy at New Growth Counseling Services with play therapy. But I do offer play therapy to all ages. Kids just like it more, or more comfortable with it. But so I would appreciate feedback on that. That's an area that I was struggling with a little bit tonight that I'd like to do more with.
You know, I think that one of the things in our society that we have to have some remessaging, that attending a parenting class is a sign that you are a quote unquote good parent. Like, it's not, nobody here, I mean, with the comments, it's like, we know what we're doing, but we want to do better. We want to understand more. It's like, we want to tweak it. And I think that that's why, because I don't know if it's because sometimes parenting classes are court ordered, if there's a stigma with it or what, but that would maybe be something that Prevention Works could work on, is like how to change that messaging of like why you would do a parenting class.
Well, and so what do you think? Excuse me, my response would be, just from being in these 2 sessions with Rachel and having been to parenting classes, taught parenting classes, and know about a lot of parenting classes, they can be very boring. And I find, to me, for where we are in 2022, this framework, I think, is a little bit more, I don't know, it's just, to me, it feels like a step in the right direction, I guess I would say, because it's bringing that thing about our whole internal regulation. Thank you, Rebecca.
Is it okay if I ask a question before we
Please.
Yeah.
leave? Because I have 2 boys, a 2-year-old and 4-year-old. One who's the 4-year-old's on the autism spectrum, and my 2-year-old will be 3 soon, and I think he might be on the spectrum too. But people will come up and try and talk to my 4-year-old, and I find myself telling them that he's on the spectrum. He doesn't really talk. Or like if he's having his tick and it's just like he does and his arms go out. And I say he's on the spectrum. Am I like making excuses for him? Or like I don't really know what to tell people. Like I just kind of blurt that out. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, well,
So,
it doesn't seem like you're making excuses. Like, that is the behavior related to having an autism diagnosis. I'd be curious around the pull in you to explain it. Kind of experiment with, it's just what he did. And unless somebody asks, maybe not say anything.
Okay. Because they'll say, "How are you today?" and try and talk to him. And I'm just like, he's on the spectrum. He doesn't know a lot of words yet. So I don't know if that's appropriate.
It is, yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with responding that way. No, it's true. It's factual. And I wonder if there's room to be not necessarily creative, but you don't owe anybody an explanation for for why he's doing what he's doing.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Good question. Yeah, and Amanda made the comment that that's a way of advocating for him, and it is. It can be that it's an educational opportunity, and it is not making excuses. It sounds like a fact to me. Yeah. Anything else before we say goodnight for tonight? And I look forward to seeing whoever can all be here next week.
Thank you so much. I'd like to advocate that you could get paid for an extra 15 minutes worth of questions.
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate that. All right.
Always causing trouble.
That's right, I know. All right. right,
And-
thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you.
As
Good
with,
night.
Good
as
night.
with last time, I'll get this video up. It'll be on the pwforkids.org website, and we'll follow up with y'all via email. So you can, if you want to review or if you missed any or anything, but yeah, and if you have not signed up for the next 2 classes, we'd love to have that count. So appreciate y'all spending time and have a fabulous night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Is the sign up for the next 2 sessions on the Eventbrite or?
Yeah, I was trying to make it as easy as possible, but because it's the same Zoom link, but then if
Oh,
I
sure.
had the Eventbrite signups, then I can kind of, you'll get the note, you'll get notified a couple hours before. And so we have a kind of a tally on who's coming.
Sure, yeah, I was missing that this week but I was like, oh yeah, but it's happening, and I'm really glad I printed the flyer and it's on my refrigerator, and
Awesome.
so that's why I was like, okay, go.
Yeah. I'll make sure,
Great.
I'll make sure to make sure the link's obvious when I respond to emails. We have to get some incentive emails out to EA. So anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Anne. Stopping recording.